I made a Dragon Ball VR simulator in Unity. So I started off by creating a new Unity project. I went with the latest version 6.2 because of the newly and improved XR toolkit for VR. The first thing I had to do was to get an input from the controller whenever I pressed a button and translate it into an animation for a hand. I had no idea how to do that, so I looked up some tutorials for VR and got to it. After a couple hours of watching tutorials, I was able to get this result. I then started messing with the XR input system to further understand how the XR actions worked, and made a script for a basic VR controller that allowed vertical movement for flying. Now that I had the controller working, I wanted to make a better looking scene since the current one looked like absolute shit. I created a terrain and started sculpting it with some hills to fly around. I wanted to make it look like Namek, so I added some bluish green color for the grass and painted on some dirt. And just like that, I had a beautiful Namek to fly around. Well, not really, it still looked like shit, but it'll do for now. Now I wanted to add some key blasts that I could shoot out of my hands, so I created a prototype with a sphere and a trail renderer. Since the key blasts in Dragon Ball come out of the palm of the hand, I added a child object to the hands that tracked the position and rotation for the palms, and now the blasts were looking much better. Something was feeling off about the scene, and that's when I realized that I forgot to add a green sky to Namek, so I did that really quick. I really like how the key blasts look like in Fighter Z, and wanted to make something similar for mine. To achieve this look, I would make a particle system with billboard particles spinning around. This would give it a 3D look, so I opened up Photoshop and started working on getting the look for the blasts. Then made the particle system with a trail renderer. I tried a couple different ways to get it to look how I wanted, but sadly I couldn't get it to work without making the texture look faded. So I decided to put it off for now while I learn how to make anime stylized visual effects, but I will come back to it later. I also changed the color from yellow to blue and added some post-processing effects to make it glow. Then I coated some matte to make the blast go on a curve instead of straight. To fix the terrain, I made a shader that would take the slope of each face of the terrain and assign it a color based on its steepness. The threshold for the slope can be controlled with a slider, as well as the blending of the two colors. Then I added some textures and started re-sculpting the terrain. I tried a couple different methods to get that cliff style that Namek has. At first I was going to make a bunch of terrain pieces in Blender and put them together in Unity, but it turns out that the set height tool works perfectly for this. During this, I also added some visual and sound effects for when you're flying. To make it look not so empty, I modeled a couple of trees in Blender and placed them around the terrain. I also made a water shader and added a couple of rivers and lakes around the map. Then I added a muzzle flash for when you fire key blasts, as well as some more sound effects. It is now time to start working on special attacks. I started off by making a script that would track the position of my hands based on the controller distance. The first attack I started working on was the Kamehameha. The only way to get it to spawn would be by pressing both grips while the hands were close together. To fire it, you had to let go of the grips, and to cancel it, you had to move your hands away from each other. I made some visual effects for it, and after adding some sound effects, this is the result. The next attack was Vegeta's Final Flash. To start it, you had to stretch out your arms and press both grips. To fire it, you had to let go of both grips while your hands were close together. And to cancel it, like the Kamehameha, move your hands away from each other. After adding some sound and visual effects, this is the result for this one. The last thing I did was add an ocean and fog so the map wouldn't just sit in a void, and bumped up the contrast so that it wouldn't look so dull. And that's about it for this Deblog. This is my first real VR project and I plan on continuing working on it. Next time I'll add the tri-beam with a zoom feature that appears on the triangle made with my hands. And maybe some enemies to fight, who knows. I will take some time to learn how to make stylized visual effects and redo some of the effects from this Deblog. I'll put some gameplay at the end of the video, so I hope you enjoyed it and thanks for watching.